The monsters that murdered Preston Davey. Which prison are they in? And some shocking revelations and some, shall we say, unseen information that people aren't aware of. A lot of people were shocked when I mentioned in the video that they were actually on bail for 2 years after the murder of poor Preston Davey. So these two absolute wrong-uns, Varley and McGowan, are in separate prisons. Jamie Varley is in HMP Wakefield. John McGowan, it is said that he's in HMP Manchester, which is not true. He is in a dispersal prison. I am trying to find out. They are keeping it quiet because obviously there's going to be retributions. There's going to be prison justice. These two wrong-uns are going to be in the headlines soon enough for prison justice, which I've done in another video. So the reason why John McGowan will not be in HMP Manchester. Yes, there is a bacon wing, a VP wing, vulnerable prisoner, nonce wing, however you want to describe it, which is K wing inside of HMP Manchester, formerly known as Strangeways, but it is not a long-term wing. He will be transferred, or he will probably be sitting inside of a high-security prison as we speak, a dispersal. But like I say, I'm trying to find out. But the other shocking revelations that I'm going to go into in this is how were they able to be on bail for 2 years and living together. Also, some questions about Preston Davey's funeral and were these two monsters allowed to be at the funeral, and did they actually do the funeral arrangements? So I have done a lot of extensive research into this. People have got the answers here, and I have spoke with people and some professionals and give us some insight into why they were on bail for so long. But before I do get into it, 70% of the viewers are not subscribed to my channel. It's free to subscribe, so please go down, double check, and if you're not subscribed, hit the button, people, because it does make a massive difference to the channel. But I shared a post yesterday on my YouTube channel, because there is a section on here where there's posts that I do share. And a lot of media outlets on Facebook and the such online outlets have actually been watching my channel, which I know they're watching my channel anyways. I'm pinching me story, even using me image like this from me channel, putting it side by side with John Varley and doing a full interview sort of on it, and using my info off me channel without prior, shall we say, prior agreement or prior permission. They did get no permission whatsoever. This is copyrighted material. If you do want to use this, get in touch and we'll come to some agreement if you want to use me factual expertise and insight knowledge on the system. Because it was in the Yorkshire Live, the Manchester Evening News, I believe. There was a load of different outlets have all used the same story. And one good thing, they have mentioned me channel. Well, please, if you do want to use it, plug me channel properly, put the link in so people can click on it. Because I have been getting tagged in it of quite a lot of people and saying, have you seen this? And I was contacted by a number of outlets, press outlets, asking if I would do an interview and could they use my material. And I did say yes, but I do have a flat rate. I give them the flat rate fee, and there was no more contact. Soon as any fees are involved, if you want to use my expert knowledge, if you want to do an interview with me and take up my time, then yes, I'm going to charge for it, because this is a job. It's journalism. It's not something that you do for free. But getting back to the story, they were released on bail and not remanded into custody. So why were they released on bail, and why did it take 2 years before they were charged? Well, the stories that they made up was that it was an accidental death. He accidentally fell in the bath and drowned, even though from the offset you could tell that this was an absolute lie, but because it was the death of a 30-month-old baby, it had to be treated with the utmost professionalism. And if they did immediately get remanded, and because it took 2 years to get all the evidence together to charge them, if they were initially remanded into custody, there is something called a custody time limit. You have to be charged within 6 months or released. And if they had charged them and it took so long, there is legal loopholes where it could have been a lot harder to prove, or they could have been released without charge. So that was the reason why it took so long, because the extensive research into the murder, the post-mortem, the forensic analysis, the digital forensic analysis of the phones, because all of this takes a very long time. So if they were in prison on remand while this was going on, then their legal team would have had them up in court trying to get them released. Then it would have took longer, and there would have been technicalities, so they couldn't have took any chances. And when they were released on bail, it wasn't a murder charge. They were released on bail for child neglect. And that was the reason why these two absolute monsters were allowed to live together for 2 years in a brand new £500,000 house, which they had just purchased. But they weren't allowed to attend the funeral. The funeral was arranged by Preston's biological parents, the mother and the father, and the foster parents, because the foster parents had Preston for 9 months. A lovely couple, lovely caring foster parents that obviously foster a lot of children until they are adopted. And they weren't even formally adopted by these two monsters. It was ongoing. The adoption process was ongoing. And these monsters were doing this from the offset. I'll not go into details about what they've done, because everybody watching my channel will be familiar with it. And the little one had 40 separate injuries, some of them internal injuries. Some of the evidence from the phones, the forensic analysis that had come from the phone, had all the digital forensic analysis of the phones retrieved from Snapchat and different things, had disgusting videos, photos about what had actually been going on. So this was obviously part of what was used to convict these two predators. So like I said, the biological parents, David Nolan, I believe his name was, the father and the mother, and obviously the foster parents, arranged the poor baby's funeral. And they were not allowed to attend because child neglect, and they weren't allowed any contact with the biological parents or the foster parents. That was part of their condition. So these two beasts lived together in that lavish house, £500,000 house, for 2 years. But how could they afford this, and how could they keep up with payments, and how could they fund their lifestyle for 2 years? Well, when I've looked into this as well, because 2 seconds while I get this up, but because they were just released on bail and weren't formally charged, and because it was child neglect, they were immediately suspended from their jobs. 2 seconds while I get this up. So they were immediately suspended. But guess what? Because they were suspended and they weren't charged for 2 years, they were on full pay. So Jamie Varley and John McGowan did not lose their primary sources of income during the investigation, as their jobs technically depended on the outcome of the trial. So understanding UK employment laws regarding suspension, they were treated as follows. Paid suspension. Jamie Varley was a secondary school teacher and head of year at South Shore Academy in Blackpool. When he was arrested in July 2023, the Sidari Multi Academy Trust immediately suspended him from teaching his duties. However, under UK law, an employment suspension during a police investigation is not a punishment but a neutral act. Because a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty, Varley remained on full pay while suspended. His job and outcome were legally secure until he was formally charged in June 2025, subsequently convicted at trial, which triggered his immediate dismissal and the permanent revocation of his teaching licence. So John McGowan, high-earning career finance manager, was a highly successful Northern Operations sale manager for an asset finance company based in Salford Keys. He earned a substantial salary, which was heavily supplemented by performance-based corporate bonuses. Because he was initially only bailed on suspicion of child neglect rather than murder, he was able to maintain his employment status or utilise private financial resources. The couple's financial stability during the 2-year investigation was so significant that just 22 days after Preston's death, they successfully collected the keys and moved into a new £500,000 detached home. The employment status strictly depended on the outcome of the legal process. June 2025, the turning point, once the Crown Prosecution Service officially authorised the upgraded criminal charges, the employers had the immediate legal grounds to terminate their contracts or stop payments. Ultimate dismissal. Any remaining corporate ties or pension rights were completely severed when they were found guilty at Preston Crown Court, resulting in Varley's whole life order and McGowan's 25-year sentence. And Varley went to Wakefield Prison, which I mentioned in the previous video. And McGowan, like I've just mentioned, will be going to a high security prison, probably going to somewhere like HMP Franklin to live out 16 and a half years he has to serve off that 25-year sentence. And I don't believe he'll make it out alive. Same with Varley. That's why they're on the highest protection inside the system on the VP wings, which is also known as the bacon wings. And a lot of people new to the channel are saying, what is a bacon? A bacon is a nonce. Bacon bonce rhymes with nonce. This is the terminology that prisoners use, obviously with first-hand experience being in the high security prisons. When you see these or you walk past the wings, the lads would say that's the bacon wings. Or if you're waiting to be transported from one part of the prison to the other, you're locked off behind the gate whilst either the bacons are walking past or you're walking past and you're screaming out the gates at them, you dirty, wrong and bacon. And that's how you used to give them grief, because you had no contact with them, because obviously you had the main wings, then the bacon wings. So that is why they are called that. But that was just a few questions people had been raising, because like I said in the previous video I'd done talking about him inside of HMP Wakefield, before any press articles were on it, before any media outlets, any news outlets, I had the video up and running first, because obviously I do get information from inside the system, from either lads or people working in the system and people who have access to records of prisoners and different things. So when I actually done the video, if you go back and have a look at the comments, people were saying, I can't believe they were actually bailed. And that was the reasons why. Because I even thought, because when you go onto Google and try and access information, then you go into AI mode. And when you put in about when did they get remanded into custody, it gives out fake information because obviously wherever the AI mode is getting it from, it says they were remanded into custody so they couldn't attend the funeral because they were locked up behind bars. Not true. They were released on bail because, like I said, initially it wasn't a murder charge. It was child neglect, what they got released on bail for. And like I say, they weren't allowed any access to any of the the foster parents or the biological parents for obvious reasons, because if they did, them biological parents, even though the child was taken from them, they would have still loved that child immensely. And if they come into contact with these two adopted fathers, this gay couple, then what do you think the mother and the father would do if they cross paths with these? They've obviously got their own backgrounds. The mother, she was sentenced to life when she was 14-year-old for a murder of a 70-odd-year-old woman, her along with an accomplice, and she'd been in and out of prison. So the biological mother is Sarah Davey, but the child was taken from her because obviously her past. And Sarah Davey's mother had actually said she wanted Preston. She wanted to take Preston into her care, but because unfortunately she had breast cancer, the social services said you're unfit to look after the child and you will have no contact whatsoever. So the biological parents and the grandparents weren't allowed any contact whatsoever, even though Sarah Davey's mother fought to get Preston in her care. No, because you have breast cancer. She is now free of breast cancer. She had her treatment. That baby Preston, could have been living a happy life with the biological grandmother. But Sarah Davey, obviously, she's had a violent past. She was in jail for murder. If she crossed paths with these two monsters, she probably would have acted out some of her own justice herself. Same with the biological father. So they weren't allowed any contact whatsoever, and they didn't attend the funeral, which is rightly so. Imagine those two monsters were allowed to arrange that baby's funeral and attend it. Wow, there would have been some massive uproar. But they are trying to bring in Preston's Law. 2 seconds, I've got it up somewhere here. Preston's Law, which they are trying to bring in so that anybody, here it is here. So, a primary condition for denying bail and remanding suspects immediately is if they pose an immediate flight risk or a direct threat to the public. Because the couple was immediately suspended from their jobs, Preston had tragically passed away, and no other children were living in their home or under their care, the police and courts did not deem them an active, immediate threat to the wider community during the investigation. This delay and the fact they were left free to live together caused immense public outrage. It ultimately catalysed Preston's Law, a systematic campaign pushing for immediate remands and swift emergency interventions when children die suspiciously while placed in state-approved adoptive homes. So that is what is ongoing. They're trying to get Preston's Law, which something I would back myself. If a child who was going through an adoption period and has died in their care should immediately be placed on remand. It just goes without saying. These two wrong'uns were allowed to live freely for 2 years in the community, but they are now living in misery inside of prison. They are going to get prison justice, and it will be brought to you firsthand on this channel, people. No bullshit. This channel is flying. Like I say, a lot of people aren't subscribed. The subscriber count should be much higher. The videos are getting hundreds of thousands of views, even though I do have 145 subscribers, which I am so grateful for. But that number should be a lot higher. So do double check that you subscribe to the channel, because this needs to be spread far and wide. And if you go and have a look at the comments, people are saying this channel is a no bullshit channel. You get first-hand experience. I've got experience of it being inside of high security prisons. I've got bent screws inside the high security prisons that give me information. And I do have friends inside the high security prisons who I was in prison with whilst I was imprisoned in Monster Mansion myself, which is HMP Franklin. HMP Wakefield is the original Monster Mansion, but because there's predators like this housed inside of HMP Franklin, where Huntley was killed, where Wayne Cousins is housed, David Fuller, the morgue monster, Levi Belfield, the list is endless of monsters inside of HMP Franklin. So that is Monster Mansion number 2. Yes, I was in there, obviously on the main location wings, and there's still lads inside who I was inside with doing big sentences, who are giving me information, who I'm in contact with on a regular basis by phone. So I do get first-hand information. I've got first-hand experience of being inside those prisons, and you get no bullshit information on this channel. This channel, as you can see, no edits, just straightforward, fast-flowing information, which is true to form first-hand experience, like I've said. So do enjoy the content, people, even though the content is of gross, horrible shit that needs to be told, because the mainstream outlets don't tell you exactly what I do. I give you no bullshit first-hand experience, no bullshit information. Humble, straight to the point, and from someone who's got lived experiences, not a poncy journalist who just talks shit and says whatever they like to get clicks, views, and attract shit through putting fake headlines on, or putting headlines on from someone like myself who gives first-hand knowledge, which is straight to the point. But I'm going to leave that one there for now, people. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your week ahead whenever you're watching this. And do me a favour, comment, like, and subscribe. And enjoy the rest of your day, people. But most importantly, as I always say, stay safe.